Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time we're diving into a topic that probably raised a few eyebrows even back in the swinging 60s.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
The groundbreaking research of Masters and Johnson on human sexual response.
Pioneering stuff.
Their book, Human Sexual Response, published in 1966.
1966.
It dared to explore what happens to our bodies during sex.
A topic that was
A topic that back then,
shrouded.
shrouded in secrecy and often just riddled with misinformation.
Absolutely.
So much wasn't known.
So much wasn't known.
Before we get into their work, though, I think we should rewind just a bit.
Okay.
Weren't the Kinsey reports a big deal in this area, too?
Absolutely. The Kinsey reports, published in the late 40s and early 50s, were pioneering in their own right.
Yeah.
Kinsey surveyed thousands of people about their sexual behavior.
Huge undertaking.
It was really a huge undertaking. It shattered taboos and revealed the wide range of human sexual practices.
So groundbreaking.
But Kinsey relied solely on people's self-reported experiences. Masters and Johnson wanted to understand the actual biological processes happening within our bodies.
So instead of just asking people about their experiences, they decided to actually observe sex in a lab setting.
They did. It was a bold approach.
That's putting it lightly.
Yeah, bold is an understatement.
How did they even find people to participate in this kind of research?
Well, initially they worked with prostitutes,
Sure.
but they quickly realized that to get a truly representative picture, they needed a more diverse group.
That makes sense.
And surprisingly, they found volunteers from all walks of life willing to participate.
Wow. That's pretty amazing considering the societal norms of the time.
It is.
Finding everyday people willing to be observed during such intimate moments must have been a challenge.
It was.
How did they approach this ethically?
They were very careful.
Yeah.
They used standard measures like pulse and blood pressure.
Of course.
But they also created these specialized instruments to observe sexual responses,
I see.
all while prioritizing participant comfort and anonymity. They made sure everyone felt safe and respected throughout the process.
That's really important.
It is.
You can't expect honest and natural responses in a clinical and uncomfortable environment.
Exactly.
So it's pretty amazing that they were able to conduct this research at all.
It is.
And their findings led to that famous 4 stages of sexual response we hear about all the time.
Yeah.
Excitement, plateau orgasm, and resolution.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the key takeaways from their observations during these stages?
Well, through their meticulous analysis, they revealed some fascinating patterns in how our bodies respond during sex.
Like what?
They observed the physical changes that occur in both men and women throughout the cycle,
Oh, interesting.
noting how blood flow, muscle tension, and heart rate all play a role.
So they weren't just observing, they were identifying the biological mechanisms underlying these stages.
Right, and this model, while debated, it remains influential today.
Powerful stuff.
It really is a testament to their groundbreaking work.
One of their most significant findings, I think, involved debunking a myth that's plagued men for centuries.
Oh, yeah.
That phallic fallacy.
The phallic fallacy.
What did they discover about that?
Well, they found that anxiety over penis size was largely unfounded.
Really?
They showed that the vagina is incredibly elastic and can accommodate a wide range of sizes.
Huh.
Ultimately, they found that penis size is a minor factor in female sexual stimulation.
So they were basically saying that a good lover is more than just measurements.
Exactly. They helped shift the focus from anatomy to the complex interplay of physical and emotional factors involved in sexual satisfaction.
Makes perfect sense.
Yes.
Sex isn't just a mechanical act. It's about connection, intimacy, and pleasure for both partners.
Absolutely.
Did they find any major differences in how men and women experience these stages?
They did. One key difference they observed is the male refractory period.
Oh, yeah.
That period after orgasm where men typically can't achieve another one immediately.
Right.
For women, it's a different story. Masters and Johnson found that many women are capable of experiencing multiple orgasms if stimulation continues.
That must have turned some heads back then.
It certainly did.
Yeah.
This finding challenged a lot of assumptions about female sexuality, and it sparked ongoing research and debate in the field.
It sounds like Masters and Johnson opened up a whole new world of understanding.
They did.
But it's also clear that their work wasn't without its critics.
Right.
Where did they fall short, and what areas sparked further debate?
Well, their research, while groundbreaking, primarily focused on the physiological mechanics of sex.
Okay.
Critics argued that they didn't give enough weight to the psychological and emotional elements. What do you think about that critique?
Well, it's true that their primary focus was on the physical, but you have to remember they were pioneers entering uncharted territory.
Yeah.
They acknowledged the importance of psychological factors, but saw understanding the physiology as a crucial first step.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Sort of like building a foundation before you can construct the rest of the house.
A good analogy.
What did their later work focus on?
Well, their later work did delve deeper into those psychological and emotional aspects, but their initial research really set the stage for further exploration.
Right, it was the foundation.
But even with their focus on the physical, their work challenged long-held assumptions about female sexual response.
Yeah.
And some of those challenges came from other researchers, right?
You're exactly right.
Right.
We'll get into those critiques and what's been called the new view of women's sexual problems in the next part of our deep dive.
I'm looking forward to it.
Stay tuned, because it gets really interesting.
It does.
See you in part 2.
See you then.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the complexities of human sexual response.
It's a fascinating topic.
It really is.
Yeah.
We left off talking about how Masters and Johnson's research, while groundbreaking, primarily focused on the physical mechanics of sex.
Right. The nuts and bolts.
And left some critics wanting more.
Yeah, wanting more.
So let's explore those critiques and what's been called the new view of women's sexual problems. What exactly is this new view all about?
Well, in the year 2000, a group of women scientists and clinicians came together and proposed this new view, arguing that Masters and Johnson's model, while revolutionary for its time, oversimplifies the female experience.
Interesting.
They felt it didn't fully capture the nuances of women's sexuality.
So they're saying that women's sexuality is more than just a 4-stage physiological process.
Exactly.
What aspects did they feel were missing from the original model?
One of their main points is that women often don't separate desire from arousal in the way the Masters and Johnson model suggests.
Yeah.
For many women, those two are intertwined and influenced by a whole range of factors beyond just physical stimulation.
So it's about context, right? The emotional, relational, and even cultural factors that play into a woman's sexual experience.
Exactly. This new view emphasizes that a woman's sexual responses are often deeply connected to her emotional well-being, the quality of her relationships, and her overall sense of safety and comfort.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You can't isolate sexual response from the rest of a woman's life and experiences.
Oh, yeah, it's all interconnected.
And because of this, these researchers called for a broader classification system for women's sexual difficulties.
It did.
One that takes into account not just the physical, but also cultural, relational, psychological, and even medical influences.
It's multifaceted.
It's about acknowledging that female sexuality is multifaceted.
Yeah.
And can't be reduced to a simple checklist of physiological responses.
Exactly. For example, a woman might experience difficulty with arousal.
Okay.
But the root of the problem could be anxiety stemming from past trauma stress in her relationship, or even a hormonal imbalance.
It's like a detective puzzle.
Right. It is.
You have to look beyond the surface symptoms and delve into the underlying causes to really understand what's going on.
Absolutely. And this is where the limitations of a purely physiological model become more apparent. It's not that Masters and Johnson's research is wrong.
Right.
It's that it only reveals one piece of the puzzle.
It laid the groundwork, but there's a much bigger picture to consider.
Right.
This new view isn't about dismissing their work. It's about adding to it, building a more comprehensive understanding.
I agree. It's about recognizing that female sexuality is influenced by a complex web of factors, and all of those need to be considered in research and clinical settings.
This reminds me of something we touched on earlier.
Okay.
Recent research challenging some of Masters and Johnson's findings, specifically regarding the female refractory period and the possibility of female ejaculation.
Yeah, that's right.
What are some of the key takeaways from this more recent research?
Well, what's fascinating is that these challenges further highlight the individual variation in female sexual response.
Okay.
For instance, while Masters and Johnson observed that many women don't experience a refractory period, later studies suggest that some women do.
Okay.
And while they didn't observe female ejaculation, we now know that it does occur in some women.
So we're back to the idea that there's no one-size-fits-all when it comes to female sexuality.
Precisely. The key takeaway is that ongoing research is continuing to refine and expand our understanding, leading to a more nuanced and individualized view of women's sexual experiences.
It sounds like we've come a long way from the days when sexuality was a taboo subject.
We have.
But even with all these advancements, there's still so much more to learn and explore.
Absolutely. Knowing that a purely physiological model has limitations, and that female sexual response is incredibly complex, what new avenues of research do you think we should be exploring? What new perspectives might we need to consider?
I think we need to move beyond just measuring physical responses and delve deeper into the emotional, psychological, and relational dimensions of women's sexuality.
Okay.
Maybe by using more qualitative research methods, ones that allow women to describe their experiences in their own words. We could capture the richness and diversity of their perspectives that way.
That's a great point. It's about listening to women, not just observing them.
Exactly. Each woman's experience is unique, and it's shaped by so many factors.
And that brings us back to Masters and Johnson. They really opened the door to studying human sexuality in a more scientific and open-minded way, which is incredible considering the time period they were working in. But now it's time to build on their foundation and explore those areas they weren't able to fully delve into.
I agree. Their work was groundbreaking. But like any scientific research, it's meant to be a starting point, a catalyst for further exploration and discovery. We've covered a lot of ground in this episode, starting with the societal context of their research, the key takeaways from their findings, the criticisms they faced, and what the future might hold for research in this field. Let's wrap up our deep dive in the next part by reflecting on Masters and Johnson's legacy and what it means for our understanding of human sexuality today. Welcome back to the deep dive, everyone. We've been exploring the work of Masters and Johnson.
Those pioneers of sex research.
Yeah, those pioneers who dared to bring human sexuality into the lab.
Not an easy feat back then.
Not at all. We've seen how their work, while groundbreaking, has also sparked some really interesting debates about the complexities of female sexual response.
It's a complex topic for sure.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's take a moment to reflect on their legacy. What did they get right, and what areas still need further exploration?
Well, in my opinion, one of their greatest contributions was simply bringing the conversation about sex out into the open.
Yeah, it was taboo back then.
Before their work, sexuality was treated as something taboo, shrouded in secrecy and shame. They helped to destigmatize the topic, making it okay to discuss sex in a scientific and clinical context.
That shift in perspective was huge. It paved the way for more open and honest conversations about sexual health and pleasure.
And their impact goes beyond just changing the conversation.
In what way?
Their research methods, with their dedication to direct observation and physiological measurement, were groundbreaking. I mean, remember, they were gathering data in a way that had never been done before, and that provided some really valuable insights into the actual mechanics of sexual response.
And we can't forget their 4-stage model of sexual response.
Excitement plateau.
Orgasm and resolution.
Yeah, even if the model itself isn't the final word, it provided a foundational framework for understanding the physiological processes involved in sexual arousal and orgasm.
It gave people a starting point.
Exactly.
For understanding these complex processes.
Their terminology has even become part of our everyday language when talking about sex.
But as we've discussed, their focus on the purely physiological aspects of sex, especially when it came to female sexuality, has been a point of contention.
Right. Some people felt it was too narrow a focus.
The new view we talked about argues that women's experiences are just more nuanced and influenced by so many other factors.
Exactly. And I think this is where future research needs to focus.
Okay.
Moving beyond just measuring those physical responses and really delving deeper into the emotional, relational, and psychological dimensions of women's sexuality.
We talked about doing more qualitative research, where researchers actually listen to women's experiences in their own words, right? That seems like a good place to start.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that every woman's sexual journey is unique and shaped by so many factors beyond the purely physical.
Masters and Johnson opened the door to a more scientific understanding of human sexuality.
Which was an enormous step forward.
It was groundbreaking, especially given the time period they were working in. But like all scientific research, it needs to be continuously built upon. It seems like they provided the foundation, and now it's up to future researchers to take it from there.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Their work was a catalyst, and now it's time to explore those areas they weren't able to fully delve into.
We've learned so much during this deep dive into Masters and Johnson's work, the societal context of their research, the key takeaways from their findings, the criticisms, and what the future might hold for research in this field. They certainly left a lasting legacy. What final thoughts would you leave our listeners with today?
I'd say their work, while imperfect, opened the door to a more nuanced and compassionate understanding of human sexuality. And it's really up to all of us to continue that exploration, to keep asking questions, challenging assumptions, and advocating for a view of sexuality that embraces complexity and celebrates individual differences.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the fascinating world of Masters and Johnson. And to our listeners, keep those minds curious and those conversations flowing. Until next time, happy diving.